Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to the many students attending this class online. We continue. We're now at the very end of chapter 17, the second longest chapter in the text. There are these two very long verses. Actually, they're called verse 81, but they're long, they're in an odd meter, and they're completely out of context. So we've been taking the liberty to skip things. This will throw us off, so to speak. We'll lose the continuity from last class to this class. So we'll set those two verses aside and continue then with verse 82. All right. And the general topic, as throughout the whole text, atma-vichara, self-inquiry. Na swayam swasya nanyascha, na swayam swasya nanyascha, nanyasyatmana heyagaha, nanyasyatmana heyagaha, upadeyo na chapyevam, upadeyo na chapyevam, iti samyang mati smrita, iti samyang mati smrita. Na swayam swasya atma. You have to connect all these words, jump around with me. Swayam, you yourself. Swasya, in the second line, atma, your own true nature, atma. Na heyagaha, cannot be negated. And in the third line, na upadeyaha, cannot be proved. So we have to connect all these words. Your own true self can neither be negated or proved. This is a way of Shankara pointing to the fact that your true nature is not like anything else in the world. Everything else in the world is available to us for examination. Examination using our five senses, examination using science, examination using logic. But that which is not part of this world, that which is a fundamental reality, is not available for sense perception, not available for scientific investigation, and not available for logic, which means you can't prove or disprove what Vedanta teaches. Huh? That's right. Your existence is a matter of fact. It's a matter of your experience. Obviously you can't disprove it. The moment you try, you prove your existence. So then you might think, well, wait a minute, can't we prove the existence of sat-chit-ananda Atma? Well, follow the logic, and this is very important in Advaita Vedanta. What is the scope in which logic and reasoning is valid? So every tool of knowledge, logic can be considered a tool of knowledge. Every tool of knowledge has a certain limit, has a scope over which it's valid. For example, your eyes. You can see me, but you can't see the heat my body is giving off. That's light. That's infrared radiation. Your eyes, if you remember in a science class you learned something about this electromagnetic spectrum. It showed this huge spectrum, and then it said your eyes can see only this little bit about it, little bit. Well, that means you can see my body. If you could see infrared, you'd see my body putting off heat. You'd see the computer putting off heat. You'd see the light bulbs putting off heat, but you can't. The point I'm making here is every means of knowledge we wield has a limited range of applicability scope. So, what is the scope of logic? Simply put, the scope of logic is the world. But Atma is not one more thing that happens to exist in the world. Atma is a fundamental reality, non-separate from the underlying substratum because of which the world exists in the first place. Atma is Brahman, that's what Tattvamasi means. Brahman is not one more thing in the world. Brahman is that because of which the world exists. Atma happens to be non-separate, identical to that Brahman. So Atma is not one more thing in the world. Therefore, it is outside of the scope, not only of perception, not only of scientific investigation, but outside the scope of logic, because it's a fundamental reality. So therefore, swayam, you yourself, swasya atma, your own true nature, na heyagam, can't be negated, na upadeyam, can't be proved, established through logic. Then we get the other one. He says also, na anyahacha, anyasya atma. So this is like a parallel construction. The same holds true, anyaha, for someone else. So first we took up the case of you. Then you think, what about anyaha? What about somebody else? And a good somebody else to consider in modern times would be the neuroscientists who are trying valiantly but vainly to find a source of consciousness. So suppose a neuroscientist tries, so neuroscientist, anyaha, someone else, anyasya atma, his or her own atma, na heyagaha, na upadeyaha. So a neuroscientist can neither negate nor prove the existence of consciousness. And we've had this discussion on several earlier occasions, and I said valiantly but vainly their efforts. Valiant because they are pouring so much work into neuroscience today. There's a tremendous amount of research, and they're making tremendous strides in understanding how the neurons, the activities of the neurons in our brain give rise to everything we experience. Eventually, it'll be 100% mapped out. Take decades, perhaps, but eventually all the neurons, all the neural activity will be mapped out to the extent that it can prove it can show why your eyes work the way they do, your ears work the way they do, your thoughts work the way they do, your emotions work the way they do. Eventually, neuroscience will be able to establish all of that. But neuroscience, just like our discussion about sight, has a limited range. Logic has a limited range. Science has a limited range. What is the range of science? The observable. All of science is based on observation. That which can't be observed can't be scientifically studied. Can consciousness be observed? Consciousness belongs to the observer, not the observed. So this is the discussion we've had several times. We won't drag it out today. But science, too, has no access to consciousness because it's not an observable thing that's available for scientific study. And so therefore, a scientist who anyaha, we're saying, Shankara probably wouldn't have had a neuroscientist in mind when he wrote this verse, but I think in modern times, that anya, the other person, not you, but somebody else, I think applies very nicely today to that neuroscientist who then, because of the limitations of science, its inability to access a fundamental reality. Science can only measure observable reality. It has no access to the deeper reality, the fundamental reality, which is atma. Therefore, just as you can neither prove or disprove the existence of consciousness, in the same way the neuroscientist and anyone else, any philosopher, any great thinker, any mystic, no one, any Buddhist, some Buddhists try to negate consciousness, no one can prove or disprove the existence of consciousness. Then he concludes, evam, the end of the third line. Thus, evam, thus, iti samyak matihi smrita. Thus, this teaching is smrita, it is remembered, it is known as how? Samyak matihi iti. That iti, as most of you know, is our Sanskrit quotation marks. So samyak mati is put in quotation marks. Why? You may not remember, but it's the title of our chapter. The title of chapter 17 happens to be Samyak Matihi. Most of the earlier chapters took their title from the first word of the title of the chapter. Not so for chapter 17. So chapter 17 takes its title from this word, Samyak Mati, correct understanding, true wisdom. So, with that in mind, now, this button. we can proceed. Atma pratyayika hyesha, Atma pratyayika hyesha, sarva vedanta gochara, sarva vedanta gochara, jñātvaitam hi vimuchyante, jñātvaitam hi vimuchyante, sarva samsara bandhanaihi, sarva samsara bandhanaihi. At the end of the first line, break apart he from esha. Esha, this, and it's in feminine gender. It's reaching back to samyak matihi. We have to make that connection. So this correct understanding, esha samyak matihi, this correct understanding is in the second line, sarva vedanta gochara. It is what is found in all of the Vedantic teachings, all of the teachings of Vedanta. And technically speaking, the teachings of Vedanta are the teachings of the Upanishads and everything based on those Upanishads. So this teaching is based on, and all of those teachings, of course, contain then the discoveries of the ancient rishis. So the ancient rishis had the immediate recognition of these truths. Just to make the point clear, what text did the ancient rishis follow to gain their wisdom? So you get it, right? So the rishis are the ones who came first. Mantra drashtaraha, they're called. The ones who discovered these teachings and then put their wisdom into the form of words, mantras, the mantras of the Vedas. Mantra drashtaraha means the seers, the one who saw the teachings and put them in the form of mantras. So that wisdom is, and the first word is so wonderful. I've never seen this used anywhere before. Atma-pratyayika. Pratyayika, the root meaning is to lead you to discover. Atma pratyayika is that which leads you to discover Atma. And what's wonderful about the word, usually we speak in terms of Atma-jnanam. We say that the teachings of the Vedas, the teachings of the rishis, give you Atma-jnanam, knowledge of Atma. And that's a subtle misnomer, but a crucial one, a crucial misunderstanding. We've talked about this many times, and Shankara makes it so clear with the use of this word. Atma-pratyayika, Shankara is saying here that the teachings of Vedanta don't say what Atma is, but rather lead you to discover your own true nature. Let me make that distinction clear. First of all, the Vedas don't say, when I say the rishis and the Upanishads and Vedanta teachings don't say what Atma is, of course, you see words, Atma sat-chit-ananda. So it's not, don't take that literally. The point I'm making is, when Vedanta says Atma is sat-chit-ananda, does that make you enlightened? That's the point. Certainly Vedanta says Atma is sat-chit-ananda. Fine. And if I sit here and I go on saying Atma is sat-chit-ananda, Atma is sat-chit-ananda, Atma is sat, will you get enlightened one day? If I say it enough times, and if you think about it enough, you get the point. Conventional learning works in that way. In fact, that kind of repetition is helpful in conventional learning. When you were in school, did you study, if there was something that you needed to learn for a test, did you study it just once? Repetition is valuable for conventional learning, but if I keep saying Atma is sat-chit-ananda, that repetition is useless. Because Atma, and to use the words I've used before, Atma is not like other teachings. Other teachings, we can say, are compilations of information. Vedanta is not a compilation of various kinds of spiritual information. The most important word you're going to hear today is this. Atma is a method, a methodology. In Sanskrit, prakriya. Vedanta is a method that you employ with the teacher's help and the scripture's help. It's a method that you personally employ to look at yourself, to turn your attention within and discover the truth of who you are. So, you are sat-chit-ananda is a statement of truth, but it doesn't work because there's no method that goes along with it. There's a methodology that's crucial. And there are many ways of explaining the difference between information and methodology. One of the most common metaphors is that of a cookbook. Vedanta, of course, is not a cookbook, but we're using this as a metaphor. So you open up your cookbook, and on page 11, it says, I'm not making this stuff up. I know nothing about cooking. But on page 11, it says pineapple upside down cake. I think there is such a thing? Okay. That much I know. Don't ask me anything more about it. Pineapple upside down cake. Now, when the cookbook says pineapple upside down cake, that's like when Vedanta says atma-vichara. It's a statement of a fact. There is such a thing as pineapple upside down cake, and there is such a thing as atma, which is sat-chit-ananda. But now the cookbook goes on to give you instructions on how to make this cake. Suppose you learn all those instructions. There's a lot of details in it. How much sugar? How much pineapple? How much flour? In what order are you supposed to mix these ingredients about? Suppose you go through that cookbook and you make copious notes. And you're done. That sounds ridiculous, but that's how most people study Vedanta. Is it not true? That's how most people study Vedanta. They make copious notes. You may not make copious notes, but you're making mental notes. And then class is over. Okay, I learned something today. So what? This is why Vedanta is distinguished not by what it teaches, but how it teaches. This is crucial. There's plenty of information in the cookbook. There's plenty of information in Vedanta. But that information is not the goal. Now, where Vedanta and the cookbook are different, that's pretty obvious, right? The outcome of using the recipe is a pineapple upside down cake. The result of using the teachings of Vedanta is atma-vichara, the immediate recognition of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda. But notice I used the word using. Do you study a cookbook or do you use a cookbook? And that's a really helpful term to apply to these teachings of Vedanta. Everyone says, I study Vedanta. On Sunday mornings, I go to Arsha Bodha Center and I study Vedanta. Well, if you're studying Vedanta, it's about as valuable as studying the cookbook. Vedanta is not meant to be studied. These teachings are meant to be used. Fortunately, if the teacher understands how they're supposed to be used, the way they come out is not as information. Notice when you come here and listen to these classes, it may sound different than how Vedanta is usually taught, because most teachers of Vedanta teach you the cookbook. That's how Vedanta is usually taught. Atma is sat-chit-ananda. Shankara teaches this, Shankara teaches that. The rishis taught this, the rishis taught that. But that's teaching the cookbook. What we are engaged in these classes is not trying to grasp all this information that's found in the teachings of Vedanta. In these classes, we are all engaged in a process of self-inquiry, atma-vichara, and it's the job of the teacher to lead your personal process of self-inquiry. So the guru is the guru is the one helping you use the teachings. Teachings are here, but the teachings, as we just said, the teachings are not merely meant to be understood. The teachings must be used, employed in your personal process of self-inquiry, and that's where the guru comes in. If you pick up a text on your own, you will probably just get the information. The most important role then of the teacher is to help you actively use these teachings. Notice I said actively. Most people listen very passively. When you get you're gaining information. To accumulate information is a very passive activity. But a wonderful student of Advaita Vedanta, I think as you all are, I know that very well. You are all wonderful students of Advaita Vedanta. Therefore, you are not passive listeners, but you are active listeners. When I say something, you examine that statement and use that statement to examine your own self, to inquire into who you are. You use these teachings because you are good students. Anyway, that's enough of that. Anyway, this word pratyayika I've never seen used before, and it's just delightful because it says that this teaching is a methodology. However, in the beginning of the second half, Shankara falls back into the standard language of Vedanta. So this pratyayika is unusual. But the usual word we use is atma-jnanam. Now, do you see why I don't... That term, self-knowledge, is problematic because it suggests information. And that's kind of the standard nomenclature used in Advaita Vedanta. And in the beginning of the second half, Shankara's right back to that standard nomenclature. He says, jnatva etam, having understood etam, this, reaching back again, samyak matihi in the prior verse. Having understood this correct wisdom, he, indeed, vimuchyante, plural. They become free, sarva samsara bandhanaihi, from all the bondages of worldly life. Jnatva evam, having understood this teaching. Do you see why I'm balking at that language? I wish Sanskrit had the English word to use. In fact, it's interesting that both in Sanskrit, there's no word that means exactly to use or employ. In fact, even in Hindi, right? If you say you use a tool, you use where, in fact, sometimes you reach outside of Sanskrit, istemal karta hai, to make use of something. Prayojana. So the first meaning of prayojana in a dictionary is purpose. Upayoga comes a little bit closer, but the root, yuj, is to be connected. So upayuj means to pick up a tool. Doesn't mean to use the tool. So in Hindi mein, how would you say? I use a tool. What do you use for use?
Prayog.
Prayog? Okay. And I think that Urdu word istemal is also used in that context. But prayog, as I said, the first Sanskrit meaning for prayog is a purpose. Anyway, I'm being way fussy here. I apologize. I do that now and then. But I guess that's an occupational hazard. When you spend your whole life going deeper and deeper and deeper into that, you start to think like that. Anyway, so this is my pet peeve. When Shankara says, jnatva etam, that you should understand this teaching, I wish he could say you should use this teaching. But he doesn't use any Sanskrit words that have exactly the same meaning as the English to use, to employ. I don't think that word is... can you think of anything? Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go check after this class now. I have an English to Sanskrit dictionary. So I want to check that and see if it has anything clever for to use or to employ. So instead of saying nyatva etam, I wish Shankara would have said something meaning this teaching must be used. And having used this teaching for the sake of self-inquiry, having used it to the extent that not just accumulating information, but you have been engaged in a process of self-inquiry that has culminated in your discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma, he indeed then vimuchyante. They become freed, they become liberated. All right. Now, we come to the closing verses of this chapter. We'll go a little quickly because the nature of the verses are such. Let's continue. Rahasyam sarva vedanam, rahasyam sarva vedanam, devanam chapi atparam, devanam chapi atparam, pavitram paramam hyetata, pavitram paramam hyetata, tadetat samprakashitam, evam samprakashikam. Rahasyam. No, actually start in the last line. Tat etat samprakashitam. This has been taught. Tat etat, this is what? Samprakashitam has been taught, has been unfolded in chapter 17. This is the conclusion of chapter 17. So the reference here is this has been taught in chapter 17. What has been taught in chapter 17? Go up to the first line, rahasyam. This secret, sarva vedanam, of all the Vedas. The secret of all the Vedas. The secret of all the Vedas is this method, hidden in plain view. How many people study Vedanta and study and study and study, and after decades of study, they're still as mean and ornery as ever? It's because they didn't get the rahasyam. They studied, they didn't use. That's why. Okay? So this secret of all the Vedas, which is in the third line, pavitram, purifying. Actually, back up. Second line, devanam cha api yat param. That which is yat param, that which is beyond devanam api, even beyond the gods. It means this teaching is beyond going to heaven. Going to, beyond the gods means beyond going to heaven. And most of you know in the Hindu tradition, heaven is not an ultimate goal because it's a temporary condition born of your good karma. When your good karma is exhausted, then your time in heaven is over. So therefore, this teaching is beyond going to heaven. Pavitram paramam hi etat. And this teaching is paramam pavitram. It is the most purifying because it removes. Here, purifying is with regard to the removal of ignorance. It removes ignorance permanently in the sense that there's no more rebirth. If you go to heaven, then you come back and try again. If this ignorance is removed, there's no returning and coming back again. For reasons we've discussed elsewhere. All right, then. This is kind of, let me just preface this next verse with this observation. Short chapters just stop. long chapters usually have something at the end calling attention to the importance of the chapter. It's like a text. If you read a long text, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 18, there is at least a dozen verses which are very much telling you this text is over. Why should you study this text? Who should study this text? Who should you teach this text to? There's all of these ancillary topics, these extra topics that come, not at the end of a chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, but at the end of the entire text, in the end of chapter 18. This is a particularly long chapter in Upadesha Sahasri, the second longest chapter. So it ends with some verses which are particularly suitable to a very long chapter. And that's what we see here. Naitad deyamashantaya, naitad deyamashantaya, rahasyam jnanamuttamam, rahasyam jnanamuttamam, viraktaya pradatavyam, viraktaya pradatavyam, shishyaya nugataya cha, shishyaya nugataya cha. Towards the end of chapter 18 in Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, to whom this teaching should be given. If some of you will remember, I think there may be 2 or 3 verses about to whom this teaching should be given. Well, here Shankara says exactly the same thing. Etat rahasyam, first and second line, this teaching, this secret teaching, jnanam, this wisdom, uttamam, this highest wisdom. And again, there's that word jnanam again. And the problem is, jnanam here does not mean information. This teaching is a method. Methods have to be used. But here I think there really is a linguistic problem. And that's what I want to find out later. If Sanskrit really is missing an equivalent to the English to use or employ, prayojanam is not quite the thing.
Would the upayog word help?
He said upayog before, and upayog literally means to pick up something. Doesn't mean to use it. So upayoga is...
It's the same word used in Gujarati, Hindi.
Right, except this is not Gujarati or Hindi. This is a predecessor to Gujarati and Hindi. So I'm looking for a Sanskrit root meaning. So we'll leave it aside. And again, I'm being overly pedantic here, and I admit that anyway. So, and I'm being overly pedantic so I can complain about the word jnanam. Because everyone says, oh, self-knowledge. I should study more Vedanta. And there's a problem. Okay, enough said. Where are we? So this jnanam uttamam, this highest, quote, teaching, this highest wisdom, this highest knowledge, na, in the first line, na deyam, should not be given, should not be taught to. To be taught to whom? Ashantaya. Shantaya should be taught to one who is peaceful. Ashantaya should not be taught to one who is not peaceful. And this is actually a reference way back, I think, Brihadaranyaka. We talk about adhikaritvam, preparation, and many of you have heard the shama, dhamma, upadati, titiksha, shraddha, samadhanam, the standard 6-fold preparation. That's all the Vedanta texts quote these 6. These 6 are based on a passage in the, I think, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, talking about the student who should be shantam, dantam. So shama, dhamma, shantam, dantam. I don't remember the rest of the passage. So this is a passage from the ancient rishis and the Upanishads that describes the qualifications of a prepared student. And Shankara says here, you shouldn't give these teachings to a unqualified student. Why? And many people make the mistake of thinking, because this is rahasyam. No. And in fact, it's a rahasyam in this sense. If you teach an unqualified student, it remains a rahasyam. That's the fact. Yeah. So you shouldn't teach an unqualified student because you're wasting your time and the student's time. Go do something more productive. Shankara says in a very pragmatic way. On the other hand, in the third line, pradatavyam, this teaching should be given to viraktaya, someone who is detached. Shishyaya, a student who is detached, anugataya cha, and a student who is dedicated, devoted, a student who is very attentive to these teachings. So this teaching should be given to a proper student. And again, there's a common misunderstanding. When that word rahasya is used, I wasn't joking when I said, if you teach this to an unqualified student, it remains rahasyam. So there's no harm. There's no, if you want to maintain the secret, it'll remain secret. That's not the point. The point is, it's just, as I said, a waste of time. All right, then let's conclude this. I think this verse concludes the text, and then there's a prayer, the 2-verse prayer. So he's dadatashthatmano jnanam, dadatashthatmano jnanam, nishkriyo nyo na vidyate, nishkriyo nyo na vidyate. Jnanamichan bhavet tasmat, jnanamichan bhavet tasmat, yukta shishya gunair sada, yukta shishya gunair sada. In the second line, begin. Anyaha nishkriyaha anyaha, other than, actually that has to be connected to the first line, other than dadataha, other than one who gives. One who gives atmanaha jnanam, breaking apart the words, dadataha cha atmanaha jnanam. Other than giving this knowledge of Vedanta, one who, there is na vidyate, there is no one who can give this knowledge other than one who is nishkriyaha. This is a very odd kind of phrasing here. I believe what Shankara wants to say here is that the guru who imparts this knowledge is nishkriyaha. Nishkriyaha means not engaged in action. That sounds like a paradox. The guru is not engaged in, isn't teaching in action? Absolutely, teaching is an action. Not from the guru's point of view, however, if the guru really is enlightened. If the guru really is enlightened, the guru kind of watches the teaching take place. Teaching happens. The guru doesn't teach. This is very Vedantic, and this is kind of the language that's found in the Upanishads. Teaching takes place, but the guru doesn't teach. If the guru truly identifies as being sat-chit-ananda atma, atma doesn't teach. Atma has no mouth. Atma has no thoughts. Atma is unchanging consciousness. Unchanging consciousness doesn't do anything. There is no karta, no agent of activity. So the guru here is described as nishkriyaha, actionless. Other than that guru who is actionless, who is, actually that's pointing to enlightened. actionless here implies an enlightened guru. Other than that enlightened guru, there's no one else who is darataha, from whom you can receive. I'm kind of messing up the grammar a little bit here. There's no one else who can give these teachings. There's no one else, who can give Atma Jnana. There's my nemesis. The word jnanam has become my nemesis. For the first time, I've never talked like this before, but you understand my sense here. It's my nemesis because that puts everyone on a track to gaining information, which is not what this is about. Anyway, so I'm harping on this too much. Okay, so Atmanaha Jnanam, this knowledge of Atma, there is no one but an enlightened guru who is nishkriyaha, who is not. The guru doesn't teach, the teaching takes place because the guru is enlightened. There's no one else who can truly impart this Vedantic wisdom, meaning there's no one else who can lead you properly to discover your true nature through a process of self-inquiry, atma-vichara, as guided by these scriptures. Therefore, tasmat, therefore, jnanam icchan, jnanam icchan, if for one who desires knowledge, bhavet, if one desires knowledge, then that one should be sada yuktaha, always endowed, shishya gunaihi, with the qualities of being a good student. The idea is that a proper teacher of Advaita Vedanta is rare. Most teachers, I'm sad to say, most teachers impart information. That especially is true. I don't want to get this could be a whole topic, and I don't want to go there. But for some teachers, it becomes sort of a profession. It's like a job. It's what you stand in front of an audience, and think about professional lectures. In fact, a typical professor in a classroom is an example. They're paid to teach, and they have a syllabus, and according to the syllabus, they walk into the classroom, and they do what they're paid to do. Well, that's a typical kind. I don't. Let me put it in this way. Some Vedantic teachers fall into that category. They're not that they're paid, but their attitude is similar. They have a syllabus and they have to impart all this information. That's my point. They look at it as information. This concept of looking at Vedanta as methodology is under-recognized, even amongst teachers of Advaita Vedanta. And it's something that I guess I'm hypersensitive to because it was a big deal for my guru. And just to give you very briefly the backstory, is my guru came up in a culture where this wasn't recognized. And he struggled tremendously because the prevailing idea when my guru was coming up was that this is like in fact a little bit like the cookbook. Or in college, lecture and lab. So Vedanta is theory, and then you have to realize the truth in a lab. And it turns out to be a terrible metaphor. It doesn't work. And the moment you say, and people use that language, right? Vedanta theory, you've heard that expression. The moment you say Vedanta theory, it's no longer a specific method of leading you to discover your true nature as sat-chit-ananda Atma. To call it a theory is harmful. To call it a philosophy is equally harmful. Vedanta is a method, a methodology. This was not understood amongst those who taught my guru, and he struggled with it so much, and therefore I, as his student, I'm like hypersensitive to this issue. So because teachers, and I'll just rephrase the second half, because teachers who really understand that Vedanta is a methodology to be employed and not merely a bunch of information to be given, such gurus are rare. Not rare is perhaps too strong a word. If you have a proper guru, you should be shishya gunahi yukta. If you have a good guru, you should be a good student. This is basically what Shankara is saying here. Okay. So, this chapter ends with 2 prayer verses, which is unusual. The text opened with a prayer verse, and I think this chapter opened with a prayer. But so far we haven't seen any chapter that concludes with a prayer. This chapter concludes with 2 verses of prayer showing the importance, the significance of this chapter, being a longer chapter and containing so much more wonderful Vedantic teaching. So let's see this prayer. Jnanam jneyam tata jnata, jnanam jneyam tata jnata, yasmadanyana vidyate, yasmadanyana vidyate, sarvajna sarvashaktiryas, sarvajna sarvashaktiryas, tasmai jnanatmane namaha. Tasmai jnanatmane namaha. That last line is clearly a prayer. Tasmai, unto him, unto whom? Jnana atmane. Atma in the form of jnanam. So unto consciousness in the form of the spiritual wisdom, namaha, my salutations. And that jnanatma can refer to guru, can refer to scripture, can refer to consciousness. There is a lot. In poetry, words are used in a very suggestive way. So this word jnanatma is a very suggestive word. So salutations unto that consciousness in the form of wisdom. And he goes on, let's see, second line. Yasmat anyat na vidyate. The consciousness, yasmat, from which, anyat na vidyate, nothing else exists other than that consciousness. We opened the class with that discussion about the fundamental reality. Consciousness is a fundamental reality, and the Mahavakya that makes that so clear is the Mahavakya that comes from the Rig Veda, Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnana means consciousness. Consciousness is Brahman, the substratum because of which everything exists, and the consciousness which is present in your experience right now are one and the same. This is the ultimate discovery through Tattvamasi and other teachings. So nothing else exists other than this consciousness. This consciousness is Brahman, which is the substratum for the cosmos. There's nothing else that exists, including there's no other, in the first line, jnanam, jneyam, or jnata. There is no knowledge, there is no known, jneyam, and there's no jnata, there's no knower. This is common language used especially by Shankara, where we chop up consciousness into different bits. One bit of consciousness is prajnanam brahma, the underlying substratum. Another kind of consciousness is consciousness in the form of spiritual wisdom. Another kind of consciousness is consciousness in your experience right now as you are the hearer of my words, the seer of my form. Shankara uses the word jnata here. You can't chop it up like that. This is the point. So, na anyat vidyate. There is only consciousness. That's Advaita, right? Advaita means, Advaita doesn't mean one. Right? That's not what it means. It means Advaita, not two. Nothing else. And the reason for that is when you say one, what is the next thing you say? Two. One is the first of a series. Therefore, Advaita. Nothing else. That's a paraphrase. Advaita means what? Figuratively speaking, nothing else. There is nothing but Brahman. There is nothing but consciousness. That's the sense. Okay, and the last verse is the last prayer. Vidyaya tarita smoyar, vidyaya tarita smoyar, janma mrityu mahodadhim, janma mrityu mahodadhim, sarvagnebhyo namastebhyo, sarvagnebhyo namastebhyo, gurubhyo jnana sankulaha, Gurubhyo jnana sankulaha. Start in the third line. Namaha. Salutations. Namaha tebhyaha. Salutations unto him. Unto whom? Tebhyaha gurubhyaha. Salutations unto that guru. By the way, it's all in plural here. But plural is commonly used in the respectful sense. Many languages do that. You use the plural in a respectful sense. So salutations unto the Guru. What Guru? Sarva Jnaya. Sarva Jnaya. So unto the Guru who is Sarvajna, all-knowing. People really I can only laugh when people imagine that once you're enlightened, you know all your past lives. That's right. You get my sarcasm, right? So this is silliness. Silliness. So sarvagnya, to be all-knowing, doesn't, when you get enlightened, do you suddenly know how to speak Chinese? It doesn't make sense. You can't say that the enlightened one becomes all-knowing. It's, the Chandogya Upanishad says it best. If you know clay, you know everything made of clay. If you have 1,000 pots, all of those pots are as well known if you know clay. So the Guru is one who knows everything because the Guru knows the underlying reality because of which everything exists. So that's the proper way of understanding. So salutations unto that Guru who is all-knowing. And what Guru is that? Go up to the first line. The Guru, yaihi, by whom, vidyaya taritaha smaha. The Guru by whom, smaha, all of us, taritaha, are crossed over. We all cross over. Cross over what? Second line, janma mrityu mahodadhim. Mahodadhim, the vast ocean of janma and mrityu, the vast ocean of birth and death, the vast ocean, you have to jump down to the last line, the vast ocean which is ajnana sankulam, the vast ocean which is full of ajnana, ignorance. That vast ocean of ignorance, I would prefer to say vast ocean of worldly suffering. We call it samsara in one word. You cross over that vast ocean of samsara, yaihi, with the teacher's help, and how, the final point here, vidya, through knowledge, through your personal discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma. And the point I'm making here is that no guru can make you enlightened. Only you can discover your true nature. You have to make that discovery. Of course, without a guru, that discovery is extremely unlikely. So the guru is one who helps you wield the methodology of Vedanta while you are engaged in a process of self-inquiry which culminates in the discovery of your true nature. So salutation is unto that guru who assists you, who leads you in that process of self-discovery. And with this verse, we come to the end of chapter 17. In our next class, we begin chapter 18, the longest and arguably most important chapter in the entire text, Upadesha Sahasri. We'll begin next week, and we'll conclude today with a prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyad dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.